Thus far, the wise man has examined various issues of life as he seeks to answer the pertinent question, is life worth living? Each observation seems to strengthen his conclusion that life is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. And the reason is because of his under the sun, as long as I live perspective. Okay? And now he's about to turn to the arena of work and success. And that's the area that is really, really applicable to many of us here in Singapore. He's about to look and examine the race that we all run towards accomplishment. Okay, and he's looking at that issue now. In verse 4, I want you to notice he begins by saying, I have seen. In verse 4, he says, and I saw. In other words, Solomon has been looking around. Would you agree? How can you see unless you've been looking around? So this guy was obviously looking around. It was not just a theory. It wasn't just a concept. But it was really real life, down-to-earth observation of what goes on in the marketplaces of the world. Okay, and when we come to this portion, and let's invite the Holy Spirit really shine His searchlight of the Word into our own hearts, because this is a very applicable segment to all of us. Let me begin by saying this, okay? There are many different species of animals in the animal kingdom. And some animals live in peace. Like, for example, rabbits, guinea pigs. Okay, you put them together in one cage, they will live happily with each other. They coexist. But some don't. Some creatures, you put them in community, they will end up jostling each other, pushing each other, trampling. And then some even eat one another. And as you know, in the animal kingdom, some mothers actually eat their own children also. And one such animal that cannot live in harmony, you put them together for too long, they're going to end up devouring each other. One of those animals is the rat. R-A-T, rat. Okay? Now, think about that now. Doesn't it remind you of a modern phenomenon in our society where human beings also do that? They lie, we cheat, we slander, we murder, we kill in order to satisfy our own covetousness. What is this phenomenon that we call, what do we call it? The rat race. Very appropriate term for it. The rat race. In this race, you cannot be too nice. There's the rat race. And someone described it crudely as this, in the rat race, this is what we're doing. We lick the boots of those above us, and then we trample on the face of those below us, and then we climb. Make sense to you? And I tell you this, the rat race, even though we call it a modern phenomenon, it's not that modern. Actually, it's already been in existence thousands of years before. Solomon already found it in his society during his time, and he described it very vividly in Ecclesiastes chapter 4. And I'll show you why I say that. Just read, okay? 2 reasons. Number 1, he said, the reason why people engage in something like the rat race is because of envy. That's the first thing, envy. Look at verse 4, and why don't we read it together with me, okay? And I saw that all labor and all achievement spring from man's envy of his neighbor. This too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. What's the word there? Envy. Why do people toil and all that? He says one of the reasons is envy. The fact is that none of us like to be outclassed, isn't it? That's why we had the tendency in the modern world to keep up with the Joneses. That's why we have this phenomena in our society today. We buy the things we don't need with the money we don't have just to impress the people we don't know. See, and we're always doing that. We buy things we don't really need with money that we don't really have because we buy it all on credit. What do we want it for? Actually, it's to just impress the people we don't even know. So you drive down the road with your big Mercedes 320, wow, and then at the corner of the eye, you're looking. Every time you stop the traffic light, in the corner of the eye, you look, see whether the guy next to you looking or not. But listen to me, just for your information, okay, just to burst your balloon, the guy is not looking at you, okay? He's looking at your car. That's all. Understand that, And the root of it sometimes is envy. I'm not saying everybody is engaged in it, but many times like this, envy is a root. Interestingly, we notice that when we compare ourselves with others, isn't it true that we always compare ourselves against those who are better off than us? Very seldom do we compare ourselves with those who are worse off than us. We always compare with those who are better off than us. And the result is what? Dissatisfaction, of course. My 4-room, his 5-room, Not good enough, The dissatisfaction comes because we always compare with those who are better off than us. Seldom do we consider how much better off we are compared with those who are worse off than we are. That somebody would say, I used to complain that I have no shoes until I met the guy who's got no feet. And you think again. What are we comparing? If envy would have her way, then gratitude would have no room to stay. See, and Solomon observed that envy is one reason why people toil. That's number 1. Besides envy is addiction. Addiction. You start out with envy, then you run this race. After that, what do you find? You end up addicted. Now you got it, but you can't stop because it becomes an addiction. Look at verse 7 and 8. Let's all read this together, shall we? Again, I saw something meaningless under the sun. There was a man all alone. He had neither son nor brother. There is no end to his toil, yet his eyes were not content with his wealth. For whom am I toiling, he asked, and why am I depriving myself of enjoyment? This too is meaningless, a miserable business. In other words, once you are in it, you are stuck. If you actually start running this rat race, you'll find that you cannot stop. Like John Rockefeller was once asked, how much money does it take before a man can be truly satisfied? Good question, right? How much money does it take before a man can be truly satisfied? He gave a one-liner answer, very insightful. He said, just a little bit more. Correct, huh? Just a little bit more. When I started out in the ministry, I earned something like a few $100s. And then I said to myself, God, if you just give me 4 figure, I'll be happy already. Then I got 4 figure. After that, I said, if only you can change the first figure to something more than 1, I'll be happy already. But you know what I found? I found that you're never really satisfied. Is that true in your experience? When we start out, we always say, if only I earn 1,000 enough. When you get 1,000, you say 2. Only 2, you say 3. 3, you say 4. You're never enough. It's just never enough. And why do you think the rich can be so driven to become richer? I think it's because of an addiction. It's not logical. It's emotional. It's an addiction. Take a man like Paul Getty. He's a multi-millionaire, man. He's got huge mansions, built all over England, with many, many rooms. But you know what? That's what I discovered one day, that even though this guy has so many mansions all over, he's got a lot of guest rooms all over his mansion. But in every guest room, he installed a coiner phone. So that when his guests need to make phone call, they need to put coins. How do you explain that? It's weird, It's addiction, I call it. It's not logical, it's emotional. You see? There's another guy, rich millionaire also. Became a millionaire at a very young age of 30 or something. But even though he was a millionaire, he would walk through the bitter cold, the London winter, to get to his office. You know why? Because he wanted to save 6 pence, which he otherwise would have to spend if he take the tram car. How do you explain this kind of thing? I think the only answer is addiction. The man who chases after wealth and riches will end up becoming a slave to it. That's what it is. It's not logical, it's emotional. Ron Sider, in his book, Rich Christians in an Age of Hunger, wrote this, Listen to this. He said, we madly multiply more sophisticated gadgets, larger and taller buildings, faster means of transportation, not because they enrich our life, but because we are driven by an obsession for more. And this is the cardinal sin of Western civilization. No wonder Solomon said in verse 8, there was no end to his toil. He is never satisfied with the wealth that he had. For whom is he working so hard and denying himself any pleasure? No answer to that. The word is addiction. And this is what's keeping a man in the rat race once he gets inside. What a miserable thing. And Solomon observed it.